order. This is a special joint meeting between the Gainesville City Commission and the Historic Plan Board. It is October 28th, if you can believe that, 2020. We just have one item on our agenda. So would any member of the City Commission like to move adoption of the agenda?
Moved.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Johnson, seconded by Commissioner Hayes Santos to adopt our agenda. And would the chair of the Historic Preservation Board like to get a similar motion from their members before we turn it over for any public comment on the motion to adopt the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, this is Jason Simmons of staff. I don't see the chair on the meeting at the moment. I do see the vice chair has just joined, it looks like.
I think Bill is muted though.
Yeah, yeah. In the absence of the chair, I'll move to adopt the agenda.
I'll second.
Okay, very good. Then we'll turn it over to Larry for any members of the public who wish to comment on the motion to adopt the agenda.
No comment on the agenda this time, Mayor.
All right, very good. Madam Clerk, would you please move to a vote?
Commissioner Sacco?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons?
Aye.
Commissioner Ward is absent. Commissioner Ariola?
Aye.
Commissioner Hayes Santos?
Aye.
And Mayor Poe.
Aye, that motion passes 6-0 with Ward absent, who texted me and said he does expect to be about 10 minutes late, but is planning on attending the meeting. Mr. Vice Chair, over to you.
Thank you. I do not have the agenda before me. So,
there's just one item, which is a discussion between the two of us.
so I will move to discuss.
Yeah, we just need your board to vote on adoption of the agenda.
Oh, very well. I'll hear a motion to adopt the agenda.
I think somebody needs to call us individually.
Yeah, you got the motion. We just need to vote.
Right.
I'll do a roll call vote.
Thank you, Jason.
Michelle Hazen. Kyra Lucas.
Aye.
Danielle Massey. Elizabeth Hausauer.
Aye.
Nicole Nesberg. Elizabeth Hawk.
Aye.
Michael Hill.
Aye.
Jay Reeves. Bill Warner.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you all for taking time out of your afternoon to join us. You probably either saw or were updated about the discussion the commission had briefly at our last meeting before filling the vacancies that are open on the board. We wanted to meet with you and just discuss where the Historic Preservation Board is right now, give you an opportunity to share some thoughts with us, and then talk about direction moving forward. So with that, I don't know, Mr. Vice Chair, if you or somebody on the Historic Preservation Board would like to update us on the work that you've been doing and any thoughts you might have for the City Commission as we're thinking about how we move forward in ensuring that we protect historic structures and areas of our city, and how that fits into, I think, our larger equity plans. And then we'll turn it over to the commission for any thoughts they want to share. If it's okay with you, what's worked best in the past is if I just run the lights, as we say, or the hands. I can keep track of sort of who's next, whether they're from either board, and it seems to work a little bit more efficiently if we do it that way, if that's okay with you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah, that's fine. I'd be happy to proceed with that. My clock on the wall is about to hit 3, so there will be a small background interruption.
So take it away. Yeah, give us an update
yeah.
on what you've been up to and where you think we need to be headed.
It's been very active. We've had some very intense and very productive, both in terms of our objectives and I think in terms of the public, especially in recent months. We've been able to communicate our objectives in a manner that has gotten across to those before us why we are doing what we're doing and what our priorities are, and had excellent cooperation from the public. We are particularly distressed at the lack of a full-time staff support. I mean, you take a significantly smaller community like St. Augustine, which has 3 people full-time on staff focused on their historic assets. And they are full up with keeping up there. While ours are not as old, they are just as important to our community. We are constantly challenged by out-of-town interest encroaching on our objectives. We not only, we have a very enthusiastic board, but we do need strong, really full-time staff support. Jason and Yvette do their very best with the relatively small amount of time that they're allotted to support of our objectives. Unfortunately, a number of things slip through the cracks. There are those out there that, for one reason or another, including that their realtor never informed them in regard to owning property in the historic districts, that they just proceeded with doing things that slipped past the building division screen and occurred, and then that makes for hardship for all of us all the way around. So better staff support would help with that significantly in communicating notice to the public. That's right up front there. I think our most important elements of our situation at this point in time. If there are those who would like to add to that, Mr. Mayor, I would encourage them to speak at this time.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me, before we do that, see if we can get an update on the hiring for that vacant position. Mr. Feldman, do you know when we can expect that position to be filled?
Mayor, we'll certainly get back to you. As you know, the position's only been vacant for about 45 days at this point on there, and Mr. Persons might have a better calendar on that, but usually, especially when you're trying to hire around the holiday season, it usually pushes into the beginning of the new year.
Sure. Andrew, do you have an update for us?
Yeah, actually, it was one of the things that I thought maybe it was worthwhile to talk a little bit about today with both boards. We did have the opportunity to sit down with the candidate that had been hired by the city briefly to talk about sort of some of the issues that person saw. One of the things I think that that we realized after the position, the halftime position that the commission allocated in the the FY20 budget, which went into effect in October of last year. We were able to move forward and hire the position, but with the when we combine the existing halftime planner position that we had in our budget, and then coupled that with the additional halftime position that the commission allocated, that position is essentially an entry-level planner position, a planner one, which would be somebody who potentially would just sort of be right out of school. And I think one of the challenges that we identified with the former candidate, there was some cajoling that I think we were able to do about sort of coming back to Gainesville and coming to work for us. But that person had to take a significant pay cut to come back. I think one of the recommendations that the former candidate had made was potentially evaluating that position and potentially funding it at a higher level position, a higher level planning position, to where we could potentially be more competitive with some of the places that Bill is talking about, where a lot of those preservation planners and some of the other jurisdictions have been in their careers for many years and have the expertise to not only help sort of continue the program that we have, but also identify sort of strategically where the commission and where the program should be headed in. So that is one thing. So we have the position, we can go out and fill it and try to fill it again at a entry-level planner position, but it may be worth thinking about in terms of trying to allocate that position at a higher level, so we can increase the potential pay to get somebody in that has more experience. So that is something that we've been talking about internally, and we were hoping to kind of talk a little bit about it at this meeting.
Great. Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Commissioner Johnson, do you mind if I get Ms. Hawk first to get the additional perspective from the board before I go to you? Is that all right?
No problem at all.
Okay. Thanks. So Ms. Hawk, go ahead, and then I'll go back to Commissioner Johnson.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, 5 by 5, as they say.
I'm at home and I have a clarinet practicing in the background, so pardon. I am a recent addition to the Historic Preservation Board just this year, and I have to say, I'm actually a little disappointed in our board as it exists currently. When I looked at the boards for the city of Gainesville, my understanding is the Historic Preservation Board would be actively updating the inventory of historic places in Gainesville. It would be looking to expand historic neighborhoods. It would develop programs to kind of encourage urban neighborhood conservation and historic preservation efforts. We would be looking actively for grants and funding to do these things. I mean, this is all what is in the actual ordinance that establishes the board. And I feel like, honestly, as a board, all we do is look at windows. And I'm not saying windows and setbacks and approving things like that aren't important to historic preservation. I just feel like there is so much more to historic preservation than just windows and trim on buildings. We have to look at the larger picture of these entire neighborhoods. So for me, I feel like we are not doing as much as we could be doing. But I do want to say we have very dedicated members who are passionate about historic preservation. I think we just need some new blood to really get it going. Michael Hill is a new member, and he immediately brought up Seminary Lane and looking into Seminary Lane and how to protect that neighborhood through historic preservation measures. So what I would like to see is us as a board, because we are all capable and have a great passion for this, really be more active in getting out there in our Gainesville neighborhoods and looking at different ways we can protect our city, because we really are having a lot of outside developers come in. We're having a lot of pressure, especially on our historic neighborhoods, because they are so centrally located, right to the university, to downtown, to where people want to live. So I really want to see the board expand its vision more and be more than just rubber stamping plans and discussing 6/1 or 4/4 windows. All of that's very important, but I think there's so much more we could be doing as an organization. So thank you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. Very helpful. Mr. Hill, did you want to jump in here too? I promise.
Yeah,
sure.
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me? My mic malfunctions from time to time.
Yes, we can.
Cool. So to go off about what Ms. Hawk said, yes, I did address to the board at one of our meetings about the Seminary Lane neighborhood, and I want to take this moment to address it to basically our meeting here. So to the commissioners and the mayor, you guys probably received an email from me yesterday that detailed a Microsoft Word profile, but that was basically my research that I did on the actual Seminary Lane neighborhood. And as you guys can see from the PDF files that were attached to it, those are the archaeological surveys that were done on the Seminary Lane neighborhood, I want to say about 13 years ago. And all of those buildings are designated either eligible for National Registry of Historic Places or eligible for a contributing structure to a National Registry district. And if you look in some of those surveys, you'll see maps where they've actually have outlined the Fifth Ave street as a massive corridor for a lot of historic buildings with a couple of outlined structures on the streets. So again, like Ms. Hawk says, and I'd say like a lot of my board members will say, we do appreciate the work that we do in maintaining the healthy stock of historic houses in the Duck Pond neighborhood. But, where we are right now, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners, with the Seminary Lane neighborhood, this not only is a historic preservation issue, but this is also an equitable issue. We saw what happened in the previous times with Porter's and the Innovation District. And, one thing I want to say is that, what I don't understand either too about this board is this. We have a bunch of people, and from what I've seen, I don't see anybody that lives in the Porter's neighborhood. And another thing too is that, going forward with, I read on our agenda that, we delayed the commitment of five members. I think that's dreadful, but we do need that. But going forward, this neighborhood, Seminary Lane, needs to be designated historical. There is too much at risk here to allow this. This is a slippery slope that we too often see. And even in my hometown of Orlando, they're doing it. Prime example, in the Paramore neighborhood, you go 1 block, it's a massive soccer stadium. You go 2 blocks, it's like old historic buildings with the glass storefronts, which I've never seen. And it's happening all across Florida. And, one thing I'm going to say is this, and I'm going to speak to this. For a city as progressive and as inclusive as we are, we need to hold the line at Seminary and designate it a historical neighborhood. There's too much at risk here for this board and for this community to lose what is in that neighborhood, And so that's why actually I'm happy that this meeting is happening today, and I'm happy that I'm glad to talk about it. And, like I said, going forward, I appreciate the work we do now, but I think that honestly, our abilities are limited. Thank you.
Thank you. Over to you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be at this meeting today. And I also want to guide the conversation a little bit with I have about 8 different areas that I'd like to either get answers to, get clarification on, have a conversation about. One is a quick and simple overview of the types of decisions that the HPB, the plan board make, the city plan board, and the development review board make. 2, we've talked a little bit about this, but I'd like to get an understanding of what the HPB has been up to over the past year. I took some time and I went over the agendas and the minutes during the past year, and it seems like a lot of it is very simple and very kind of check the box and procedural is the best word to describe it. 3, based upon those conversations that we've had, I'd like to make any necessary changes and do some course correction, which I think is necessary based on some of what Member Hawk and Member Hill have said. I'd like an explanation of the planner position and a little bit more detail about what has happened, and also more of the recommendations that have come from the former planner. I'd like to read a letter at some point that he sent to the HPB and have an open and honest discussion about it. 5, I'd like this is a discussion amongst, I think everybody, really, the commissioners and the members on the HPB, is I think we need to very explicitly state what the value is of our historic neighborhoods, because I've been getting the sense lately that perhaps they don't lie in the same place. So I think that if this is an opportunity to state very explicitly if historic preservation in Gainesville is something that is a top priority for us. And if it isn't, then we say so and then we move on. But at least we know where everybody stands on this. And then we know how to move forward based upon what everybody feels in this room, Zoom room. I got an understanding about the process of hiring another historic preservation planner. And finally, the reason, Member Hill, that I asked that we put on hold the 5 new members is because I think this is an opportunity to involve more people and to expand the applicant pool. The last time I remember Desmond Walker from the Pleasant Street, the Pleasant area community applied. We decided not to go with her, but I think that this board needs some representation from our historic, especially our historically Black neighborhoods. So I'd like to expand the pool of applicants and get an understanding about what the plan is for that. And also I'd like to talk about a more robust interview process, not just for this board, but also for our city plan board and our development review board. And that is my laundry list of how I'd like to guide this conversation. First, I'm wondering if perhaps Andrew can talk about the decisions that the HPB makes, the city plan board makes, and the development review board makes, and how they're different at all.
Mr. Persons.
Sure thing.
Can I also just add one more thing? What is the deciding factor between a staff decision that the staff makes and the decisions that go to the plan board, especially for the historic review board? Thank you.
Sure. So, okay. So the city currently has 3 main quasi-judicial boards that deal with various aspects of the built environment. As Commissioner Johnson indicated, there's the plan board, the development review board, and the historic preservation board. Currently, the plan board, they hear all items, and they are mostly advisory to the city commission on most items. So they hear things like when there's a request to change the land use or the zoning on a given piece of property, they are advisory to the city commission, meaning that they hear presentation, they vote on it, and they say, hey, city commission, you should approve this, or hey, city commission, you shouldn't approve this. They don't have final authority. That resides with the city commission. Similarly, any changes to the land development code or to the comprehensive plan policies, they are advisory in that sense too. So they will, similar process, they'll hear the petition, make a decision on it, and that'll be forwarded on to the city commission for final dispensation. The plan board does have a few things that they are the final authority on. Those are special use permits primarily. So in that case, the city commission has given the plan board the authority to be the final authority on ruling on special use permits, whether to approve them, deny them, approve them with conditions, and those are a typical thing that they hear fairly often. There are a couple of other things that are in the code that the plan board deals with or does periodically. When we're doing the comprehensive plan update, the plan board is the local planning agency, which in state law means that they have sort of special status with the way that like land use amendments are processed. But primarily, those are the main things that the plan board hear. And they periodically will give sort of reports or periodically may talk to the city commission about things that they see that should be dealt with from a land development policy perspective. The development review board they primarily hear variance requests. And a variance is anytime a development or perhaps a property owner who has a shed in their backyard that sits in the setbacks, there's a request for a variance that would be heard by the Development Review Board. And in that case, they are also the final authority. Prior to 2017, when the code changed, the Development Review Board was essentially a quasi-judicial board that heard all development over a certain threshold, a certain size, number of units, amount of square footage. The Development Review Board applied the same land development code standards that staff was doing, meaning that the Development Review Board didn't have sort of a separate set of standards that they were applying to development that weren't the same standards that staff was already applying to development. But when the code changed, they now primarily hear things like subdivisions and variances. Those are the two main things that they hear. And then finally, the Historic Preservation Board. And the Preservation Board is another quasi-judicial board, and they're tasked with reviewing all regulated work items within the city's local historic districts, as well as providing guidance on any work that may be a locally designated structure that's not within a district. So like the Hippodrome, for instance, any work on the Hippodrome would go before the Historic Preservation Board. And so the Historic Preservation Board rules on any regulated work items. Now you had asked Commissioner Johnson about sort of what's a staff level review versus what's a board level review.
For the HPB, yeah.
Right, for the HPB. And those thresholds are set in the Historic Preservation guidelines.
Sorry. It's UPS at the door. It's big.
The difference between a staff review and a board review, those are set by the Historic Preservation guidelines. So, and that's a separate document that covers all of the historic districts that we have in the city. And so there's actually sections that say, if a fence is in a backyard that's not visible and it's under X amount of number of feet, then that's a staff review. If it's, in a different situation, then that may be a board review. Like a common thing that we get is if somebody wants to do a re-roof on their house and they're in a historic district, and let's say they have an asphalt shingle roof and they're replacing it with an asphalt shingle roof, generally because it's a like-for-like replacement of materials, that's a staff review. But in the instance where somebody has an asphalt roof and wants to do a metal roof, it's a different change in materials, and that would normally go to the Historic Preservation Board for their approval or review of with a COA, a Certificate of Appropriateness. So that's the difference between staff and the board review. It's actually spelled out in the Historic Preservation guidelines.
Thank you, Andrew. You've mentioned, I want to go back to some of what the HPB is tasked with. And besides the procedural things, I mean, there's a lot more that the HPB could be doing. I'm not going to go ahead and read it because I'm going to assume that that we have read the backup. But it's everything from the official inventory of cultural resources to stimulating public interest in urban neighborhood conservation, to exploring funding and grant resources, to cooperating with agencies in city, county, regional, state, and federal governments and planning proposed and future projects to reflect the concerns and policies expressed in the article, advising property owners and local government agencies concerning the proper protection, maintenance, enhancement, I guess I am going to read it, and preservation of cultural resources, advising the city commission concerning the effects of local government actions on cultural resources, conduct regular public meetings and call special meetings that you do. Otherwise, for the objectives and purposes stated in the historic preservation, report to the city commission the board's activities at least once a year. and everything else, it seems like. So my question is what I'm interested in this board doing everything it says on this piece of paper. And what does that look like? What does it mean to correctly resource you to do that? What does it mean to provide the support that you need to do that? Are you all interested in doing the work that is on the sheet that the Historic Preservation Board has been tasked with? So those are the questions that I have. And I'd like to have a discussion around that because, something that concerns me is when you hear that the Historic Preservation Planner, comes in at a, level 1 planner as a level 1, I realize that sometimes either inadvertently or not, either people or initiatives are set up to fail. And I want to make sure that that is not the case with what is going on with the Historic Preservation Board. So what do you all need explicitly to be successful in the work that you all are doing?
Could I address some of that?
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, didn't mean to take over your job.
For the good of running an orderly meeting, if you'd raise your hand, there's if you open the participants tab, there's a little raise hand function, and I will take people in order as I see them, just to keep things fair. Did you find that, Jay?
Yes, I'm finding it. I'm just
okay. Good.
I'm not seeing the little raised hand thing, but
it's on the bottom right.
I got it now.
Right on. Okay, and I see. Okay, yeah, we'll take those questions, and I wrote all your questions down, Commissioner Johnson. So we'll try to knock them out, as we get to them. But let's go ahead and take some other comments or questions as well. So Commissioner Simmons, I have you up next.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you guys hear me? It sound like, can you hear me? Okay, yes. Awesome. So, the previous planner who left, Sal, when he wrote that letter, I think he hit every point. And what I took from that letter from Sal was that the city just has neglected to have a formal preservation program, period. Sal, speaking on his behalf, he wasn't new to this. So it's not like he came into this position as a beginning historic preservation planner. He worked with the city of Gainesville prior. He worked in Amelia Island prior. So he has extensive knowledge, education, background in historic preservation. He graduated from University of Florida. So he knows the area very well. He lived in this community for a very long time before he left and came back. So when he submitted that email and when he simply said that the city has neglected a formal preservation program, that's exactly what has happened. We look at the duties of what the criteria is for a board member, and it's very technical. And maybe at 20 years ago, that was the need, but that's not the case now. You have 6 out of the 9 board members, either an architect, real estate, some type of specialized field, whereas you don't have, you only have 3 members from the community that can partake on this board. Again, that maybe was the way it was 25, 30 years ago. That probably was the need, but that's not the case now. And so I think what we need to do is look at section 30-3.5, and let's look at the criteria. And as a board or as a commission, we need to revisit those criteria. I think that's the first thing we need to look at, first thing we need to address. And also, when we look at the current criteria, and Commissioner Johnson, she read off some of the things, some of their duties. And in all of that, to this day, I don't see where the accountability lies. no one has been held accountable for the duties that has not been done. And so you have to, this whole program has failed us. It's a lot of work. I've had the pleasure of working in this department in the past, and it's extremely difficult. You know, you have to educate the public. You have to do the outreach. You have to go out into the community. And so it's extremely hard when you don't have the resources in the department to facilitate it. And so you may have certain board members that, and we have to remember, no one sitting on that board is getting paid. It's not a paid position. They volunteer their time. And there's only so much time in a day. And so you have to take that into consideration as well. But what I really think has happened is we have failed as a city to have a formal preservation policy program in place. It's been neglected for a number of years now. The criteria is outdated. I think we need to have deadline. We need to sunset certain how many times you are allowed to serve on the board. You know, we have I guess because of passion, people want to do the right thing. They want to do the best and some of the knowledge that they have, but also things change. And I think we need to allow others to have an opportunity to be on these boards. But I think we need to open it up. And it's so limited because how the section 30-3.5 is written. We need to address that. I think once we come up with a different criteria, once we put accountability in place, because you have to look at staff as well. And everybody in that department is just didn't have the resources. It just didn't have the resources. And so, you know, I'm happy we're having this conversation again. I think this is something that's extremely important, but I want us to focus on how do we change, how do we update, how do we edit the current section of 33.5, and how do we bring that up to date, bring it to its current state. And we have to make sure that the people are involved who live in these communities. We have to also educate the people that currently live in historic neighborhoods, because living in a historic neighborhood is costly. And I think a lot of residents don't understand that. And so we have to put programs in place to assist those who need major repairs, to assist those who cannot afford the upkeep of living in a historic neighborhood. And that's where the grants come in at. That's where you have that special program. And that's where you go out and look for different things that could help. And so, yeah, I think the board could do a lot more than what's been done in the past. I think with great staff to facilitate some of the board's help, just staff to help facilitate that. We can do a better job. And so I totally agree with the passion that Commissioner Johnson have and many of us have on this Zoom meeting about the protection of our communities in the historic neighborhood. But again, the city itself has failed in not having a historic department that's just viable. And so I'm glad, again, we're having this conversation. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner. Next, we have Mr. Hill.
So I wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Commissioner Johnson said and also what Commissioner Simmons said too. Mayor and commissioners, one thing I will tell you that I think is a little, I guess you could say, weird and it kind of struck me as that's odd. Nobody on this board has access to the Florida master site file. And, Sal actually did. And that's actually how I was able to find those buildings that I sent you guys. But I will tell you, it's very hard to. I contacted somebody that's up in Tallahassee for that. And they still haven't, I tried to get my own login so I could, do more research into the Seminary neighborhood. But unfortunately, Tallahassee's dragging their feet, and that's for another story. But nobody on the board, to my knowledge, doesn't have access to the Florida master site file. And I'm like, well, that's a huge resource, being a preservation board, that we could use, to see what's out there, and then like I said, when Sal actually, went in for me to that file and to the master site file and showed me the buildings in seminary that are considered historical, I was blown away. And I'm like, why don't we have access to this? And so I found out when meeting with emailing Mr. Fowler in Tallahassee that actually you can get access to the file if you're on a HPB across Florida. You have to sign though a paper that says like, hey, you're being tasked to handle state artifacts and the locations of them, and so therefore don't tell people where those artifacts are, even if they're outside of preservation or preservation. So there's a binding part of it where you sign and it's like, hey, if you tell your friend that, hey, there's an archaeological site here that's on private land and it's not protected, and your friend destroys it, you can be held liable. So there's no liability for the HPB to have access to this file. And so I think that absolutely we're being limited in not having access to this file. My next point I want to make is this. Equitable is a big theme that we've been talking about in this year, especially with what has happened across the nation, and unfortunately, speaking to this board, and there's nothing against the people here, but there is no representation, like I said earlier, from Porters. Porters is a historically Black neighborhood, and I don't see anybody on here who even lives in the Porters neighborhood, and if the commission decides later to designate seminary as a historical neighborhood, I personally think that we need some board members, whether it's one or two, I don't know, to be from that neighborhood, because only the people in that neighborhood know what's going on in that neighborhood, and that's just what I personally think. And that's why I think that this board can grow and that this program can grow. Another thing too, I tried to get seminary on the Main Street application. I talked to the lady that's up there in Tallahassee, and she actually told me that seminary would have been a great candidate for the Florida Main Street application. And unfortunately, I'm an undergrad now. I'm actually learning urban planning. So, that's why being on this board actually really intrigues me a lot. And, I read that application, and my goodness, as a regular citizen, I don't understand anything about it. So yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the board needs more resources at its disposal to better protect the cultural resources. I mean, Gainesville is a historic town, and it's a great town. And I think honestly, I think I'm agreeing with Simmons to an extent that yes, we have failed, but we still have an opportunity to turn this failure into a passing. Like they say, just because you failed doesn't mean you're out. You learn from your mistakes and you learn not to repeat them. And that's what I hope that the commission today in this conversation we learn from this, and that maybe next year we're an even better board, and years go on that we're the best board. That's all I got to say. Thank you, guys.
Hey, thank you. Mr. Reeves, you're up next.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Several things I'd like to address that have been talked about. As most of you know, I do have quite a few years on the board, and it hasn't been because I've necessarily wanted to be on the board. It's been because many times we have to beg for board members. We have trouble finding board members. And so repeatedly I've been asked to get back on. And, looking backwards, because I think you have to go back a little bit to 2014 to understand where we're at today. In 2014, at that time, we had a staff member that had been with the board a number of years. We were doing most of the things that were in Sal's letter that he was addressing. And this was with a half-time person who was very frustrated in the position she was in, but I thought did a reasonable job considering. And the board worked with her. We did expand the districts. We did achieve a number of things that were successes up until that point. But the problem is around 2014, there was essentially, I don't know what else to call it, but basically a coup by that commission that had political underlines that went back to the days of Santa Fe College wanting to take over Pleasant Street. And that at that point, they not only got rid of the preservation planner, but they wanted to get rid of the entire board. They wanted to get us out of the way of the developers and everybody else. And many of us hung on. A lot of the new people don't understand that's what happened. And we've been severely limited what we could do without a preservation planner over the years. Because Ms. Simmons, you're absolutely correct. Without that as resources, all we can basically do is approve or deny what becomes before us, having to do with the historic districts that are already historic districts. If you go back even further, we, back in the 90s, tried to get Fifth Avenue, which was at that time surveyed at the same time as Pleasant Street, and should have, because it was originally one neighborhood, all been done at one time. But once again, the commission wouldn't hear it. The only thing they would accept was Pleasant Street at that time. The same thing with expanding the southeast, the same thing with Grove Street we've talked about, and Porter's has been talked about repeatedly. And it needs to happen, but I don't know if it can because of so much of the land being tied up by developers now. But the reality is all these things Sal was talking about is stuff we were doing at one time when we had support, and it was very limited support. Because like I said, it was a part-time position, but we had very highly qualified people in that position. And that made a difference. We have, over the years, had board members that were from the southeast, I believe Pleasant Street, but not many. And I will disagree with you, Commissioner Simmons, that what we do, because it's not like planning where a lot of the rules are in black and white, it takes judgment calls, it takes knowledge, it takes an understanding of the kind of different styles of architecture you're dealing with, the history of the neighborhoods. It's not easy for anybody to just walk in and do. And I will give a colleague who joined the board a number of months back, came in, and he kind of came up to speed really quickly. And then he was taken off the board because apparently he was on too many boards. So we have had people come in at different times, and it's not all of us that tend to be experts or have that knowledge that really want to do this forever. It's the problem is we keep getting called back in because the board needs our expertise and the efforts. But I think the biggest problem we face and have faced for the last 6 years is we haven't had a full-time staff person that was knowledgeable that could take up these causes, work with the board to achieve these things. Because none of us as board members, as volunteer board members, can do hardly any of those things by ourselves on that list, because we are not staff. We are strictly, volunteer board members, and we can champion the cause. We can refer things to the commission, but we can't do all that work. And it is a lot of work, and it takes a lot of expertise. So I will, I agree with everything you're saying, but I also do disagree with some of the things you're saying, because I've heard all this before. And we've taken on many of these things in the past. If you go back and look at the records over the last 20 years, you'll see that a lot of the surveys were done. We had a church rock survey that had to do with all the church houses. We were going to do a district, but once again, it got shot down or it got delayed because of lack of staffing. And if there was ever been a place for lack of support, it wasn't necessarily always the commission. It was also the planning department in the past did not support the historic preservation program. And that's probably been one of the problems we've had with trying to get somebody to come in and assume that position. But I agree with Andrew right now, trying to get somebody to come in at a beginner's position and either not have the expertise right out of school, you're not going to achieve the things we're trying to achieve. So I think we need to get somebody with expertise in that position.
All right, thank you. Ms. Hazen.
Hi. Yeah, this is an interesting one because I know so many faces and names here that I can see haven't either been in their positions for a while or do not have that long history. I know Mr. Reeves does and has, so over the years, I've been able to even learn more about the history. It's a board this is a board I've been on for many years. And just in my time on it, can name many things that we just don't have control over. And, this meeting with commissioners, what was it, a year ago, when I know I impassionately said, please get us a full-time planner. It's been a year. How many more buildings have been torn down? How many more opportunities have been lost? We have been asking, as Jay said, for the Fifth Avenue, those protections there. And it's not Seminary Lane, it is Fifth Avenue, Pleasant Street, that was divided by a railroad track many years ago, and only Pleasant Street was designated. As a result, we have lost Fifth Avenue, and it is now developer owned. We are losing everything. There's so many opportunities. I think of where the school board offices are right now. How long is it before that gets torn down? I don't believe that that's a contributing structure, and it's one of the most beautiful structures in our community. Where is that? You know, St. Michael's, let's talk about that one. We as a board said, hey, give us a month. We'd like to see this as a historic landmark. Guess what? Over the holidays, leveled and, you know, was pushed through the city. The support that we get from the city, we fought for church buildings where there's now a huge high rise across from Publix. That, you know, there were two, but one of the developer demoed one of the buildings, you know, ended up moving one of the buildings that we fought for. But I mean, went ahead and got the permission to move it. And that was a decision that was overturned by the current city commission. So at every level, we have tried. I know individually, and I know some of you may have seen me at those meetings, I was very involved as a citizen that cares about historic preservation, because that is how my voice needs to be heard in this community, that I was there when form-based code was coming into effect. I know that I brought up a lot of things that now mean that we're not going to have buildings that are 12 stories high against our historic districts, that there are limitations there that were built in. And it was for me spending my personal free time at those meetings. And so, you know, while I can certainly respect these new members on the board may not see what some of us that have been here on the long term, you know, it is disheartening, because a lot of those efforts that we put forth as citizens, as members of this board that care about our historic communities, you know, we just simply do not have the support. And so here we are looking at windows and doors and fences. And you know what happens when we bring it to the table? Like, hey, there's a neighbor over here that's putting in something that doesn't meet the code, that isn't historic. And we find out, you know what, they don't have a permit. Where's the staff that is going after that? We make the calls and say, hey, this isn't, there's no permit for this. Where is the staff that's going after that? Where is the support that we have? You know, as far as demolition by neglect, conversations that were long before many of you that were on this commission, those conversations happened, commission overturned. Where's that? All of the work that we did as board members, as individuals, poof, it's gone. I mean, so, you know, I know that I have put in a lot of personal time, not only attending these board meetings to do the very limited things that I can control as a board member, which is what kind of windows and doors and fences or roofs are you putting on? But we just don't have the support. And it has been a year since we asked this specific commission to get us a planner. So it has been a year. So now we are not doing our job. How can we do our job if you don't help us? It is impossible. So, you know, I know that we had the mid-century modern survey that happened, that, you know, we had, you know, looking at even adding to our districts. Where is that? We don't have the support. You know, we don't have the knowledge on our staff. We do not have it. So yes, pay them more, get us something. We have such an opportunity here. And you know what somebody said to me the other day? It's like Gainesville's this little community that's so close, and we never get there. We undermine ourselves. I think Jay is absolutely right. You know, we have had staff in place, you know, some of the, you know, just people that have been running the show on hiring the people within. There was definitely, to me, I think that we lost a lot of key people in a really important moment. They are gone. And, you know, so now we're rebuilding. I just don't think we have the strength in what we need to do. So, you know, I implore this commission, I mean, because quite frankly, I'm burned out. You know, I see that it just feels like a waste of my time if we don't have the support to do this, which makes me incredibly sad. As a member of somebody that lives in these districts that tries to protect them, I get the phone calls from citizens asking me, hey, what can we do for our windows and doors? You know what? We've been asking for staff to put together a list that we can provide to the public for years. We do not have it. I, as a citizen, cannot put that together. So until we have people willing to take our recommendations and to help and to put those things into effect, we'll do nothing. And you know what? Gainesville will be what that citizen said, the town that never got off the ground, because we are just spinning our wheels. We're losing things. We're hurting our communities that really need our support the most. And you know what? I feel helpless with it, and I wish I could do more. So, but without people that are, and I'll tell you, I really had a lot of hope for this particular commission that we would see more in the ways of support. But like I said, it's been a year. So I'm really hopeful that we can turn the corner and not be that town that we look back on and say, wow, we really missed it. Because I mean, I think if we haven't already, it's getting close. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lucas.
Yes, thank you. I mean, everyone so far has made very, in my opinion, fairly accurate statements. And I joined the board, about 2, maybe 3 years ago, I think 2 years ago, right when I started my PhD at UF in preservation. And I felt very similar to Ms. Hawk said earlier. I was very shocked by the lack of things that we were doing. And it wasn't what I had expected trying to break out into a preservation career. And like Jay said, this has been going on for so long, and I've heard it from them so many times. And even with you guys, when I was at that meeting last year, I got so excited. I was like, oh my goodness, they're finally going to do it. We're finally going to get a real preservation program in Gainesville, which has so much to offer historically. I mean, especially with just having celebrated our 150th birthday, there was so much that we could have done last year if we had a program that would have very much advocated the city. But as of right now, we're only able to do, as Michelle said, those limited things in those limited areas. We have no control over anything outside those districts that isn't already designated. And most of those places that are already designated don't have much of a communication with us. And yes, we could go out there and communicate more, and we could do all these things that we're supposed to be doing. But again, as everyone said, there's no money, there's no time. All of us are either full-time students or have full-time jobs in addition to this. And if you want us to go out there and do it all on our own without the support of the city, without a functioning department and finances for it, then it's going to get very sloppy, and it's going to take way too long for any actual kind of progression. Personally, I've been inventorying the downtown area and the Main Street area for the past year and a half and filling out that Main Street application. It is a hefty application, very long, very detailed. And like Michael said, we don't have access to these resources to even do the surveys. Not only do we not have the people to do the surveys now, we don't have access to the surveys that are already done. I was very lucky that Jay had access to the old surveys of the downtown area that I was able to look at and figure out all the different information. But unless it's already written and printed at City Hall, we don't have access to those files and those resources. And even when it comes to finding grants and funding outside of the city, most of us can't apply for them. Most of them have to be part of a preservation program or part of, filed by a paid preservation planner. And we could be getting so much more funding and stuff being a certified local government that we're not taking part in that. We're not using any of those resources because as a board, we can't go and get them. And when it comes, like everyone so far, I think has pretty much all kind of said the same thing. So I kind of want to ask, as a city commission, as our mayor, what do you guys want from us as a board, and are you willing to really fund a preservation program? And if it comes down to, you don't know whether or not preservation is going to be viable or economical or even good for the city, there are so many resources and statistics that say it absolutely will be if you get us the resources to make you a beautiful city. So, and as far as accountability goes, because we're all volunteer, because we don't have access to the resources, we have no accountability. We have no planner to do that with. So it's really hodgepodge right now, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hayes Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think there's been some great comments. I do want to step out, though. I mean, we have many members of the Historic Preservation Board who have dedicated their lives to historic preservation in Gainesville, and I think we need to be careful in how we're framing this of throwing kind of volunteer board under the bus and saying like it's the Historic Preservation Board's fault and stuff like that. That's a cop-out, I think, and I think we need to be careful about that. Throughout the time, I think the Historic Preservation Board, there are members of that board who have dedicated their lives to that, and I think we need to appreciate that. I do want to talk about new blood on the board. That's something that we appoint as a commission, and I was looking at the roster, and 5 of the members have served less than 2 years on the board. This is a new board that we put on there, and I do think it's important that when you do have new boards with talking about historic preservation, there is a lot of institutional stuff that happens in historic preservation in our city. And I think we need to be careful about just saying, oh, we need to get rid of all the people who have been here and everyone be new, because I think we'll lose a lot. And I think even this conversation has highlighted that there's gaps of when things have happened. And before the Brady administration, things changed during the Brady administration. So I also think we need to be, a lot of things can be done and should be done, but I don't think we can expect that of a volunteer board. I've served a lot on the city advisory boards. I know Commissioner Simmons has served on advisory boards, Mayor Lauren Poe, other ones have. It's extra stuff that you're doing, and if we want them to do more, we talked about it, but we need to hire staff to help them, and that's where it comes. I think we need to put the focus on us if we want to make the changes. There are things we need to do. I do think there are neighborhoods. I think we need to find ways to bridge the new with the old too. For example, in downtown, there's opportunities to preserve historic buildings while allowing building to happen. I think that's one of the things too of looking at historic preservation. I don't think it's just all like the whole city stays the same and that's it. It's finding how do we bridge that gap between older buildings, newer buildings, and having them morph together and work together. I think that's an important aspect of where I think the historic preservation goes, because we are seeing growth, and that growth is most likely to continue. And how do we make sure that it's consistent and works with historic buildings and historic areas? I have concerns about the straight up lines, and that's it. I think having kind of, I think there are opportunities in that area of how do we bridge the new development with the older, and not just drawing straight lines, and that's it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to express my gratitude for the discussion that I've heard so far. No one's holding back, and that's because the last time that we had a joint meeting to discuss a lot of the substance that we're addressing right now was in April of 2019. And it wasn't until the following year that we had a successful job search for the position that is now currently vacant, which I think has really led to a lot of, I think, the agitation. What I will say is that you do have support on this commission. This commission provided direction at that meeting to really begin to build the resources for a historic preservation planner and a historic preservation program. Now, I think one of the comments that I heard today, well, there's a couple that I'd like to address. The first one is that that position, since it's really a leadership position in building this program and seeing these policies, bringing policy ideas to their supervisor, which would then come before the commission, come before the board, you really are going to need more than an entry-level position. And I think that was something that, maybe from the outset, we didn't get right initially when creating that position. So that's an adjustment we're going to have to make going forward. Second, the question of how do you all get the resources to more effectively feel supported? A lot of the comments I heard today are exactly the kinds of things we want to hear. How can either staff support you and give you resources, and how can the commission do that? I think that if it's a matter of not having access to certain registries or not having access to certain files, that needs to be addressed. And if it's an issue with policy where there's no policy that allows you all or empowers you all to have those types of resources, then the policy needs to change so that you do. And that is something that this commission would have to give direction for. I don't want us to give up because we've had a tough year, or rather a tough 18 months. I want us to continue to chase that vision that we decided on that joint meeting of April, because I too felt the enthusiasm and the feeling that we were going to really build an impressive historic preservation program. And what I'm hearing from our board is that we have fallen short of that. That's certainly disappointing, but I don't want anyone either on the Historic Preservation Board or on the City Commission to feel as though that is indicative of where we're headed. Because I will say that in that intermediate time, there was a significant amount of changeover in officers and staff, but there's also been significant change in how we conduct governance over the last 8-7 months. So the things like the full-time historic preservation planner needing to be moved into higher than an entry-level position, the demolition delays, the local registrar expansion, the development of heritage overlay districts, the way of building out a program that's going to allow us to focus on appropriate preservation, reuse in new development of commercial areas. All of these, and of course, going after financial incentives and things of that nature that, a program can pursue. All of those things I'm still very interested in this commission pursuing. And I think that the conversation that we're having now, while it may not feel like a step in the most positive direction, I'm convinced that it is, because I think that honest conversations and communication can often lead to that. And I think sometimes we're a little bit too afraid to speak our minds, and that's not what I'm getting from this meeting. So what I would like for us to do is to get our officers and get our staff in on this conversation once we've all had a round at the apple, and really start to talk about how we can begin to put a lot of this into policy and really talk about governance for how these decisions get made and how these policies get formed, so that we don't find ourselves at this point again in a year, because I want our next meeting for us to be talking about the progress that we've made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Back to Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to have a real conversation. I want to stop tap dancing around this topic. I'm hearing a lot of things I've heard so many times before, over and over and over again. And Jay Reeves hit the nail on the head on some of the things that he said. But I must say this, that a lot of damage has been done in our African-American historic neighborhoods and communities. So the trust with this board and those communities is non-existent. Until you develop that trust, the situation of things that took place and how it took place and the manner in which it took place was very unnerving. It was very, it was hard hit in a lot of our communities, okay? It was done in such a way, it was deceitful. It was pretty much backstabbing. and it was low down and dirty. And so now here we are. Here we are. So let's have a real conversation. Let's have a real conversation. Okay? So you have people that has been affected by this in a negative way. And the history is there. The history is not going anywhere. You have staff members in the past that are no longer with the city, that has done some harmful things to people or members of the community in these historic communities, in these neighborhoods. And so we are faced, the board has been faced with trying to put a lot of stuff together. The board has been faced with trying to go into these communities, and all I can say is I'm not a board member, and I'm not a current staff with the cities in that department. But what you have is contention. You have a lot of animosity, and it makes it extremely difficult for current board members and past board members to do their jobs. There's also a point where we have to get past that, but before we do that, we have to acknowledge that, and we have to make amends to that. And so we do a lot of talking. We talk about how we love our communities, how we love our neighborhoods, how we want to do this. And I give you a prime example as a resident, as a member of the Porter's community. When I came to the city staff, the planning department, to ask, how can I, as a member of the Porter's community, how can I designate this particular neighborhood as a historic district? And I was told, well, you can't, because there's houses that's been previously built. There are new homes in the area, and they're kind of strategic strategy. They're within the neighborhood. So you cannot just say this whole community can become a historic neighborhood because you have houses built in the early 90s, 96, 97. That's what I was told by a staff member in the planning department in early 2000, 2005, 6 or 7 or 8. So you have so much deceit. You have so many people with so many agendas, and you have so many things that's going on politically that adversely affects the way that the board can govern. It affects how the city staff can govern. And so let's have a real conversation. And if we don't have this conversation, we're going to keep talking about this. We talked about this last year. And here we are again, like most everybody say, there's nothing has been done. Nothing has been accomplished. So where does the blame lie? Who do we blame? Or do we try to make it right? Do we try to make it right? You know, I think for the most part, most of us, if not all of us, are educated, intelligent individuals. And I'm pretty much, I'm tired of having the same conversation. I'm tired of having the same conversation. Until you or us or we can go into these communities and be upfront and honest and build the trust and build those relationships and be consistent, we're going to continuously have these same conversations. There's no trust. And so you get the feeling, I heard Michelle, hey, you know, I feel like I'm just doing this for nothing. That's what happens when there's no trust. So, you know, let's have some real conversations. Let's talk about where do we go from here for real this time, not for play, but for real this time. Where do we go? How do we put together a robust historic preservation program? How do we put the money to back it? Let's get a real a historic preservation planner that's not right out of college. Let's get somebody with some knowledge that wants to come in and do the job, and let's back that person. Let's support that person, and let's get our community back on track. I mean, I don't understand how difficult that is. We've been going through this for 5 years. I know at least longer than that. So until we have some real conversations, we're just going to keep talking about it. We're going to be going in circles. And while we're going in circles, our neighborhoods are going to be destroyed. While we keep going in circles, the board is still going to just do COAs. While we're going in circles, the public is not being educated. While we're going in circles, we're not building our stock of historic preservation homes. We're just going to keep going in circles. So I don't know about you all, but I'm tired of talking. And I think we need to address again the section 33.5. Let's reevaluate that. Let's take a good look at it and let's update it. And let's start holding our staff in the city accountable. If we're going to support our board members, if we're going to make sure that our housing and our neighborhoods and our communities are our number one priority, like we always say, we talk about it all the time, but that's neither here nor there, then let's start holding staff accountable. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Ms. Hawk.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing is there's a lot of frustration, right? There's a lot of frustration from the older board members like Chair Reeves and Member Hazen, who have devoted countless hours of their professional and personal lives to historic preservation. There's frustration from new members like myself who want more from our service on this board. There's frustration from City Commission members who are passionate about this and want this board to be functional. And I think it all boils down to one, does the city of Gainesville, do our residents even know what historic preservation is? And do they understand it and do they support it? Because really what we're talking about here is money and funding. And if we don't have a budget for a full-time, well-educated staff member, if we don't have a budget line supporting that, we won't ever do anything more than continue to have these meetings where we're all frustrated. So I think what we need is a firm commitment from the city commission through the budget and from the city manager's office that this will be implemented, that we'll get staff, that we'll get support, that we as a board will have people we can contact to say, hey, where can we find grants? Hey, can we do this program? Because without the money, it's just going to continue to be a conversation. We have to have that commitment of funding because that's the key to everything. I've lived in Gainesville a long time. I've followed historic preservation in Gainesville a long time. I've seen the small victories and the huge, huge defeats. And it really is in Gainesville, you get like a half inch forward and then you get knocked back so far. So I really feel that. And I feel the lack of trust between the communities. So my main points are we need to communicate with the community and build that trust so they understand historic preservation is good for everyone. And we need the budget commitment from the city commission and the city manager's office that we're going to have the support we need. And I really do hope that none of the other board members took my comments as a newbie as criticism on their part. It really is frustrating to be so passionate about something and come in and find out you're so limited. So thank you, everyone. That's my 2 cents.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me thank board members new and old for, as always with any board, for giving your time, because you are giving your time to the people of Gainesville to be a part of this. And I want to thank staff for doing work many times that is not, that they didn't really sign up for. We did, as I recall, and tell me if I'm wrong, but last year we funded, for the 1920 fiscal year, we funded a part-time position. Is that accurate? And we hired that position, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And that person left after a couple months. Is that accurate?
That is also correct.
Okay. All right, and I read the email. I'm sure we all read the email when that person resigned. So what I'm trying to figure out is and be very specific about is what is the ask? How do we make this specifically? How do we make this better? Don't say by providing funding. What are we funding? What do we need a full-time planner? Is that the ask?
Yes.
Okay. That's a thing we can do. If we're asking for multiple full-time planners, and that's probably not something we can do. I don't know that we can. I really don't know that it's something we can do right now. It may be because we're in the first month of fiscal year. We obviously have funding for at least a part-time person, and we could, because that's already in the budget and was in last year's budget as well. We could certainly prioritize getting that rehired and bump the budget up for, making a real commitment to bumping the budget up for that for next year. That comes at a cost somewhere else. Next year's budget is going to be a lot more difficult than this year's budget. And one thing that I want to point out, that when we talk about elephants in the room, the big one is that everything in government and in private business got thrown a real curveball over the last more than half a year. And that has affected every single department. There's a long list of things that I wanted us to get done this calendar year that just didn't happen and aren't going to happen. If the ask is to have a full-time historic preservation planner, I think that I don't see any reason that we couldn't make that happen. That's a half a position extra than what we've already done. I want us to be careful about everything about Gainesville is garbage. I don't like going in that direction. I really don't. There are a lot of things that we need to do better. This is one of them. And it's good sometimes to put our emotions on the table, but I want to make sure that whatever we do, we come out of it with a working plan instead of leaving it with a lot of raw emotion. We had this meeting last year, and we put more than a year ago in time to put a position, half position in the budget. It sounds like what we need is a full position. That's a direction, a real concrete thing that we can do, and or at least work on doing, that commissioners can advocate for as we start next year's budget, which we'll start working on soon. But I want to be careful when we start putting out a lot of emotion. We can often, without meaning to, a bunch of people who are on the screen now can end up feeling like they were thrown under the bus when that wasn't anybody's intent. At least I hope it's nobody's intent. I would be in favor of, let's get a full-time position funded for the coming year, but let's prioritize getting this half-time person on board now and get some work done and get something that people, a position that can help empower the board sitting in front of us. And then let's find a way to get the 5 board positions, I think there are 5, that are unfilled, filled. And I know that's, some of you have applied to be on the board again, I think, and we haven't finished that process, which I don't think is something we can do today. So those are 2 concrete things we can do. We get positions filled, and we can plan forward to get an extra half FTE moving forward. I like to think in concrete terms and what we can actually accomplish instead of do the thing. I want to do the thing that actually is possible. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thanks. And I just want to clarify, this is a full-time funded full-time position. I believe it was, we added a half FTE to create one full FTE. That's the job that Sal had. And what I think we heard from Mr. Persons is what we've learned from that experience is that it's probably not adequately classified because that entry-level position is not going to get someone in there that is capable to do what we're expecting of them. So we're not starting out at a half, we're starting out at a full, and we need to likely increase the funding for that full-time position to allow it to be really more competitive for the marketplace. Is that correct, Mr. Persons?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson, and then before folks on the board get a second go around, I'll go ahead and give share some thoughts as well. Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to say that I don't think it's anybody's place on this commission to tone police anybody. If you have certain feelings about the way that development happens in Gainesville because you have been screaming about it or talking about it for 18 months, and then here we are, and this is the position that we're in, then maybe you need to scream a little bit louder, or maybe you need to put a little bit of passion into it so that people will actually listen to you. Second, I think that we need to build this into our equitable development discussion. I know that, over the next couple of meetings that we have, we are going to be getting information back from the city manager about the 16-part motion. And I think that this is perfect to build into that. So whatever we decide, I think that it can come back to us sooner rather than later, based upon some of the previous discussions that we've had. Two, I'd like to understand what we can do in the interim that doesn't necessarily involve money or staffing. Like, what 3 things can we do? If we can pinpoint those and work on some of those, whether it's the commission or whether it is the Historic Preservation Board or whether it's staff, those are some things that I'd like to know before we, as we move forward in this. 3 is I'm looking forward to, at some point, making a motion about everything that we've talked about and expanding the pool of applicants, having a more robust interview process, and anything else, that we've wrapped up from this discussion. And I do want to thank, the board members that have been serving, both new and old. At the beginning, what I asked was, what specifically can we do to support the work that you want to do and have been doing? And I've heard it. I've heard that we need the planner. I've heard that we need access to a master site file. If there's anything else that you'd like to throw in here, I think it's important for us to hear as we move forward in this discussion. So thank you for the service that you all provide, and thank you for giving us some concrete examples about how we can move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. And, I agree with you that we can dovetail this with the discussion that we're going to be having over the next couple of meetings with equitable development. It does fit well with that. I also think that the staffing issue can be resolved sooner rather than later. We're talking about a marginal increase, not creating a whole new position. And that sort of thing. I obviously am not going to pretend to do the city manager's job for him. But if we're looking at finding an increment of, say, $20,000 to make the difference in the competitiveness of the position, that's the kind of thing that can be found within vacancy rates and things like that. But part of the joy of sitting in the chair that I do, and being the person who has to sort of move the agenda forward for the commission, is sometimes I have to be the jerk. Sometimes I have to be the guy that nobody else likes or wants to hear from. And I said I would do this with you, Commission, as we moved forward when it was applicable or appropriate. We just got done with the strategic planning process. And out of that, out of some hundreds of discrete items and we came up with a focus list of things that were our highest priorities and our top priorities. We did that collaboratively, and we agreed, and we all unanimously voted to adopt that strategic vision and strategic plan for our city. And in that discussion, historic preservation did not bubble up to the top. Now, I'm not saying that as my opinion of anything. Many people, especially those veterans on the Historic Preservation Board, I've been having these conversations with them for many years, when I was a city commissioner, when I was off the commission. And, Jay was really correct in that I think he was diplomatic in his assessment of what happened around half a decade ago, which was there was a deliberate and focused attempt to end historic preservation in our city. It was no less than that. And if you go back and watch those meetings, those were the words that were said, that we need to end this and we need to get rid of it completely. And that's nearly what happened. But save a city ordinance that kept a plan board and a historic plan board in place, that's probably what would have happened, And so I think historical perspective is important, and where we are now is in a rebuilding process. And part of that rebuilding process was the request from the board that was approved, accepted, and then approved and pushed forward into the agenda of the commission last year to create a full-time position. We acknowledged that was a deficiency in what we were trying to do and agreed that needed to be done. Now, we learned from that process. We learned that funding it and advertising it at entry-level position was not going to work. And that's fine. We get things right, we get things wrong. You all, well, I don't want to get on a tangent here, but the number of runs we took at, Depot Park, for example, till we finally got something magnificent built, it was a 20-year process, right? So we don't always get it right the first time. The important thing is that we acknowledge that, we learn it, and we commit to doing it better, the next time. So that's where we are. So those are achievable things. I agree with Commissioner Simmons that looking at the membership requirement, just because we remove some of those specific requirements doesn't mean we can't still look for those. They don't have to be explicitly required for us to still look for people with, say, architectural experience or planning experience or something like that. So it actually opens it up for greater diversity of board members while still giving us the flexibility as a commission to bring people in that have some ability to bring those skills to the table. And also, I will just say that having institutional wisdom on these boards has great value. Having fresh new ideas does as well. Having subject matter expertise, like many of you have, has value. But that historical, we would not be in the position we are. BB, can I just real quick, and I'll move to a different room. Sorry, the girls just got home from school. But where would the board be without like Michelle and Jay and their perspective on sort of where things have been over the long run? Would not be as good a place. So, I'm ready to start moving these things forward. I completely concur with Commissioner Johnson in that, if there are specific asks beyond what we've heard, for example, if there are resources that can be sort of freed up for y'all to use. I think a lot of the responsibility needs to come back to us, the commission. We have the ability to refer things to the Historic Preservation Board, and that then gives them the charge to move forward with things. Like obviously as a commission, we deal with lots and lots of different things, right? And our attention's constantly being redirected depending on the day, the week, and the issue du jour. If there's things that we want to see happen, we can do that through a motion of the commission to direct the Historic Preservation Board to spend some time focusing on those things and report back to us, say in a given time period. And that way we now have committed to those things that we want to see. And so, I don't see us as being in a desperate place. It's just that we need to continue rebuilding what got torn down, and the steps forward to do that include getting the staff person hired back, and getting the board completely filled with people that are ready to work, and then the rest is more about direction from the commission, as well as initiative from the board itself. I don't want you to think that you can't work on things that don't specifically get referred to you from us. But that at least lets you know that these things are priorities for the commission, and we'd like to, get some work done so we can get them back before us and get them formalized into policy. And I think that's what gets us moving forward. So with that, I'll go back around and start with you, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I would just like to recognize Commissioner Simmons. I appreciate your comments, and I think the board are very much concerned about Fifth Avenue, Pleasant Street, and Porters. We have been, but the problem is not having a staff person to go through to work with over the years. It's made it problematic because we've been in kind of a survival mode, as it's been alluded to, and kind of not very effective. I think these conversations need to be had. I think you're right. The board is become really just the design police, which is unfortunate. It gives us a really bad reputation around the neighborhoods. We're not really always seen in a positive light, and that is a problem we're dealing with right now as well. And so we need to do a little positive PR and actually get some positive things to happen for a change. And I think that's a conversation maybe specifically you could have with the board at one of our meetings, and I think it would be very productive. One of the other things is, since we're talking about when we all met over a year and a half ago or whatever it was, one of the big issues that was hot to us at that time was getting the landmark ordinance reworked where it actually made sense. That is still a big issue to us. We were not able to landmark the Masonic Lodge. There are other buildings out there that are in jeopardy. We really need to get some help from legal on that and get that done, because we need to be in the position where we have the ability to landmark a building if the owners are not cooperating, because I know of a building that is going to be coming down the road that it will be that situation, and it's a major historic building, and without the ability to landmark it, our hands are tied to protect it because it's not in a district. And by the way, the downtown district, which I originally pitched back in the 90s, I would still like to see us revisit that as far as protecting the buildings, because we have a number of commercial structures that are historic that are slowly disappearing one by one. So that is something I would like to bring up as well. The other thing that I would like to bring up is that the historic preservation planner, and when the board makes requests of that planner, a lot of times they can only do or say or make decisions that are supported by the head of planning. And let me just say, this has nothing to do with you, Andrew. This is going further back. And I mean, just like the head of the staff person has been told, has told me, we need to approve this project even though it makes no sense because people want it, be it the city manager, be it this commission of the time. And so I want you to understand, a lot of times the planner is put in a bad position too because it's political. And, you know, we're fortunate that we are not political, but we run against brick walls too, just like everybody else. And I think if you want an effective historic preservation department, the head of planning, which ultimately all of that falls under, has to support it and be proactive about it. And the other thing is, I'd like to commend the current planning staff that's been assisting us over the years to limp our way through this, even where we had planners come and go. And without them, we wouldn't even be functioning at all. So I commend them for their efforts. But, you know, this is something that it's very specialized. It needs the support. We all agree. And I'm encouraged that the commission seems to be supporting that. And that's all I've got to say right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hazen.
Well, I'm glad to hear this conversation, and I'm glad we're having it again. And yes, this year has been a lot, obviously. So when we're talking about what hasn't happened, I think it's somewhat understandable. I'm curious though, because too, it is, I like to think that we have attainable goals coming out of this. I think it's a worthy conversation. So just, I guess this is a question that maybe somebody can help me with. So we had the funding for a full-time planner over the last however long. What is the difference in what we paid that person for the very short time they were here, and what is left? Is that funding available to then just raise the salary of the person that we are looking for? Is that possible?
Mr. Feldman.
Yeah, let me save a lot of discussion on this. I've heard the message loud and clear. I will handle the funding issue for getting the right person into this position. So I don't know what that number is now. I'm not going to pretend to know what it is, but as the mayor indicated, you know, dealing at the margin like that is not something that is going to keep me up at night. So we will make that happen on there. And so, you know, this, you know, I'm now approaching, I'm 1 week shy of 1 year here. And so I found this entire discussion extremely enlightening. And, you know, working with Andrew, we will, you know, operate within, you know, within the confines that we can, but certainly understand, you know, some of the frustrations that the board and the commission have in this regard. And certain things that are within our control, we will be moving on quickly. Things that are outside of our control, such as access to the registry, which is owned and operated by the state, you know, may be a little bit more complex.
Okay, to continue on with that, I also would ask that this full-time planner, when we're searching for a candidate, I think it's very important that we're finding somebody that has knowledge of communities or has worked in a community that has kind of had their back up against the wall a little bit with development. And I mean, I think a lot of historical communities are in the same situation, but, you know, I think the focus on, our getting these individual buildings and districts protected. I mean, because certainly I hear what Commissioner Simmons is saying, we do not have that trust. But what's interesting about it is I think that goes way back, because I know in the Porter's community, Fifth Avenue, they were asked to be districts a long time ago. And it's now just with development sort of really encroaching that the ask is there again. So I would like to know that it's not too late to put those districts, because over and over again, that's the messaging that I have heard, is that it's too late. It's too late. Well, I'm not certain it is. Why is it too late? I'd like to ask that question. You know, why can we not protect these districts that now are asking for our help? Maybe they were resistant many years ago, but it is a different day today. So, you know, certainly I would like, you know, that to be explored further, how we get the answers. How do we regain the trust? I mean, I think actually, Commissioner Simmons, I know you were involved with the project over in Pleasant Street where funds actually were given back to homeowners there. Where is that funding? Is that something that we can look at again? Because I think too, it's important, as these communities, and I think Commissioner Ariella, you talked about, melding the old and the new. I think that that's very valid. I don't think any of us that are trying to protect historic districts are not open to the new, because I think the communities that are the most successful are the ones that are really allowing this sort of juxtaposition of the old and the new to come together and really create something magical. And so, I think there's a few things that because if we can help developers to understand, the benefits of it, and actually the district that I think that has done probably one of the best jobs is probably over in the University Heights on the south. I mean, we've allowed buildings to be moved, but there's a lot of new construction there, and it's really made an amazing district. And I think, helping people to understand the benefits of that and what it can be like. I think we actually have a pretty good community already in the University Heights that shows how that can happen, because I think all of those districts, so expansion of the districts, but with the understanding that we're going to be looking for that infill. And, I'm just hopeful we can find a planner that really has been in a community that has been successful at that. And the more we can expand, I mean, really, we do too really need to look at the demolition of properties that is happening. And without the protection of the individual buildings and districts, I mean, in the very short term, having something, I mean, we all the time, I think we have a couple coming up. We have these properties that have master site files on them. They're historic structures. If they're not in one of the designated districts, we get these demolition permits, and all we can say, they ask us, because there's a 3-month delay that we can implement. That's the only thing that we can do. That's the only thing we can do right now. So is there also a way in the short term, properties that have a master site file, can we put a stay on those properties for a year until we get a historic preservation plan in place? I think there's little things we could do like that would make a real difference. Anything that has a site file, give it a delay until we can get it together, because we have had these delays. And right now, with everybody knowing that we may be stepping it up as far as getting a planner, what can we do in the very short term? I think that goes a lot, talking about the moratorium on new building. Maybe it's a moratorium on tearing things down for a bit, let's look at what we can do right now to stop this. My thoughts.
All right, thank you. Ms. Lucas.
Thank you. I had a couple questions and a couple points I wanted to make. My first question is about the full-time planner, and I have two questions about it. The first is, are you guys advertising this job as a full-time preservation planner or just a full-time planner? Because that will bring in totally different pools of people. And there are even things like PreserveNet, which is a national preservation job search engine that will bring in people who are more experienced in preservation techniques and places like this that need new programs. So that's my first question.
Yes, it was advertised as a preservation planner.
Okay. Not that Sal wasn't, because he was amazing, but just making sure. My second question was, you talked, Mr. Mayor, about the recent strategic vision that you guys came together on. It's something that I've brought up before. I think that, the boards don't talk enough to each other, and I don't know how to facilitate that conversation between boards. But things like, Gainesville Vision and strategic plan should definitely have a conversation, not just between you guys and the boards, but between the boards themselves, because a lot of what we do interacts with a lot of what the other boards do, what the planning board does, what the beautification board does, what the tourism board does. You know, we should have conversations with all of them about where we can take different things and different projects that work for everybody and brings in a larger discussion with the community than just preservation. You know, if it's just us, we'll preserve everything we can and make as nice a community as possible through what we do. But unless we're having conversations with the other boards and the other departments, it's always going to be fragmented. Likewise, you know, we could establish something like a community liaison with communities that are of particular interest, like Porters and Seminary. And I know that Marty did multiple surveys, and so did Linda Stevenson at the university, multiple surveys of Florida Park area and numerous other areas that all could have, you know, one community liaison that we could talk with, and really someone who's strong in that community, who's a leader in that community, that we could really get an idea of what they want and what we can do and try to reestablish that trust. Because you're right, a lot of us are younger on this board or newer and don't have that experience of what happened back when. But every time I've talked to someone about Porter's Quarters, they're always like, yeah, that didn't go well, you know, and won't say anything else. So having someone like a community liaison, you know, a volunteer position like ours could go a long way. And having that liaison, having that conversation with other departments and boards would also pull right into your guys's equitable development that you've been talking about. You know, having that larger discussion, or even just, you know, listening to us as boards bicker among each other might bring something out of the woodwork. Also, just as a note, the National Preservation Trust Conference is going on right now, today and tomorrow and Friday, and their theme is equitable development and social justice through preservation. So if you wanted more information on how preservation can aid in these fields, they have a lot of new information about that because of their current ongoing conference. My final 2 points for, you know, Shush, is that whether we get a full-time planner or a half-time planner right away, I know we're all saying full-time planner, the type of preservation visions and projects and goals, you know, the actual substance and outcomes that some people are looking for, until we even have someone that we can sit down and have that conversation with, who knows everything about, like, you know, what the city can and cannot do more than we might know, who can go out there and talk to the people and figure out what they want. Until we even have a preservation planner, we can't give you guys any sort of preservation plan or vision for not just the communities that already exist, but the ones that are not designated or not considered historical yet. And finally, as far as all that goes, I'm not asking for a second preservation planner. I don't think we necessarily need one, but I will say, I've said this at every joint meeting we've had, and I've said it at every special meeting we've had, and very, very many of our regular meetings. The city, in my opinion, should create an internship in partnership with the University of Florida's preservation program. Their program continues to grow a large student base and continues to be an exceptional preservation institution. That is a wealth of resources of students who can go out there and will happily survey the town, you know, just for the experience. It is an untapped resource that partnership, that relationship would be extremely valuable, you know, and Jay will tell you, I've said it a million times. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Hill.
Yeah, so I just want to make one or two more points. That's it. My first point is this. So we know that the Historic Preservation Board is a quasi-judicial board, and it's administered under planning and zoning. And so, one thing that brings to mind that Commissioner Johnson, I wanted to add to your list, if you don't mind. I think that this board we should be granted the right to designate neighborhoods historic. All of us, to a point, we all care about historic preservation. And, as we've seen with what Chairman Reeves has said in the past, politics plays, unfortunately, into how we legislate. And we can see that sometimes it can get very dirty. And, dark money, I'm going to say that dark money is a real thing. It's happening everywhere. I've seen it before my eyes, even when I became an activist at 18. That's why I think that this board, to an extent should have some more say in when it comes to designating historical neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Feldman, do you have anything else, or is that an old hand?
Old hand, sorry.
All right, thank you. Mr. Persons?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did want to bring up something else for the commission to consider, perhaps at the next at your next budget cycle. So I have 4 boards in my shop. The 3 we mentioned, and then the City Beautification Board is with us as well. And each of those boards has budgets that are allocated by the commission for board duties. And there's a wide variety of funding levels. And I would love to say that those funding levels reflect some sort of grand vision, but I haven't necessarily deduced it if it does. The Historic Preservation Board, of all of the boards, has a very small budget. I think it's $300-400 compared to perhaps like the Development Review Board, which has several $1,000s. And the board budgets are important, not only for potentially financing the type of board outreach I think that the commission has talked about, but also just that money is also there for board education, for professional training, for board members to go to the conferences that Ms. Lucas mentioned. So I think when perhaps in the next budget cycle, when the commission is thinking about those board budgets, there may be some strategy, I think, gained by funding levels and sort of tying that to those maybe the board goals or the commission goals for the coming year.
All right, thanks. And what I'd say is just, I think you need to sit down with the city manager and the finance director and talk about what is appropriate. Like, so if we want to say one board member attends a conference for a year, that's X number of dollars. Robust outreach for 12 months is Y number of dollars. Right. So come up with some sort of logical nexus between, what we should be doing and what we were trying to accomplish, and then what that budget looks like. And then you can make a recommendation to the manager for the draft budget. Commissioner Sacco.
Mr. Mayor, so as to the topic of designating historic neighborhoods, I mentioned it last week, and I think it's going to be coming up on our November 5th meeting. Maybe, I'm not sure. I'm still working with Zariah on when and how that information will be presented, and it's not entirely clear, but it might come up. I've been working as a research project on how to designate historic neighborhoods just from a city designation. So the city of Gainesville designating those historic neighborhoods so that we have that distinction and we can preserve some of our neighborhoods. So it's not an unheard of concept. It's a concept that we are working on. So maybe the board wasn't able to catch it at those meetings when I brought it up, and that's fine. Like, not everybody can be at every meeting. But it is something that we are working on. Should that power rest in the Historic Preservation Board is not a thought that occurred to me prior, but I don't dislike the idea that they are the ones designating or approving the new neighborhoods. I think that's an idea that hadn't been brought up during our discussions on research, and whether this commission approves it thereafter. to help designate those neighborhoods. So we are working on some of these things. I do like the idea that Ms. Lucas brought up about an internship. It does give an extra set of hands. And I was just at the school today, and I know that students do want to be helpful. They do want to become involved. But so if we can get someone from the appropriate program that has some training and wants to do this internship, I don't think that's a bad idea. I think it's one that we should look into, along with getting that full-time planner that we keep talking about. Those are some of the ideas that I've heard that I'm entirely for. I don't know at this point how much else or how much further we have to go to get those asks, but I think they're perfectly reasonable asks that could be in the pipeline already, or that we could make happen with very little work. So I wanted to voice my support for those. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Ms. Hausauer.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't have too much to add. I agree with most of my other Historic Preservation Board members and the points that have already been brought up, specifically about having a full-time, properly vetted at the proper level planning person to help. But I guess one of my questions is for you, Mary. You had said that historic preservation didn't bubble up in the city planning list of items in the top items. And so I guess my question is, do we need to put it in that list so it can be a mandate, so it becomes a priority? Because it sounds like from the discussion we're having that it is a priority. So I'm not sure why it didn't bubble up, but do we need to articulate it and get it memorialized so that we're all on the same path?
Well, that'll be a discussion for the commission. If we add that, we've got to take something else off. And that'll have to be something that the commission discusses, that if there's something between now and 2 months ago that is no longer a top priority for the commission, because we've only got so many hours, we've only got so much money, we only have so many staff, that we have to, pick and choose what becomes a priority. But hopefully the other thing that you heard in my comments was that this does dovetail with some of our other top priorities. So when we talk about equitable development, this is a piece of that. When we talk about racial equity, this is a piece of that. So it's not as if this is not a part of what we will be focusing on this coming year, but it didn't. I mean, I can tell you, and I'm not. My own views and stance on historical preservation have been consistent and clear over many years. So it's not about whether I think it is or is not. I'm just telling you in the discussions we have, which were, I don't know, commission, how many hours, days of discussions. It was not something that got the attention of any commissioner in any significant way. So that's my job, to remind the commission from time to time what we all agreed in a very collaborative, several days on to focus our time and sort of resources towards. But that doesn't mean we take away what we already have agreed to, which is the full-time planner, which is creating a better community outreach process, which again was one of our top priorities in the strategic plan. And so I don't think it's a need to, sort of sound the alarm bell that all of a sudden historic preservation's not something we're going to take seriously and address. It's just is going to have to be woven into other top priorities that the commission agreed to.
Okay, and I guess that would be my follow-up comment then. Can the weaving be articulated? In other words, it's woven in, can it be memorialized as in conjunction with historic preservation, or however it would need to be worded in those priorities so that it, a year from now, we don't look down and say, well, it wasn't written down, it wasn't a priority, therefore demolitions continue. I mean, I feel like I'm a new board member and I feel like it's a finger in the dike every month that we have our 5-hour meetings, as everyone says, basically looking at windows, roofs, doors, and fences. because we're trying to stem the tide at this point. And it is frustrating to not be able to do more of these other things that would be lovely to do. But without the backing of the city commission behind us, and without everyone thinking that this is important to keep Gainesville the community that it is, it's a losing battle. And so I guess I'm just sort of joining with what I've heard from everyone else. It seems to me everyone's saying the same thing. I don't hear anyone arguing against historic preservation. In fact, I hear them arguing for more historic preservation, a more inclusive historic preservation. I love the idea of grants to some of these neighborhoods to help current homeowners be able to improve their properties so it doesn't become an expensive proposition. These are all wonderful things, and I would love to be able to be working on some of those things. But it all stems back to that planner position. And I think we're kind of I'm beating a dead horse, and I apologize. It's been a long meeting, but I just want to throw my voice in with that as well. We really need that person, and I'm hoping it doesn't take another year to get that person. I'm hoping we can really jump on it and get someone in sooner rather than later, so we're not here a year from now. The other thing I would ask, and I don't know if this is appropriate, can we, as the commission and the historic planning board, can we meet more than annually? I mean, could we have one of these meetings every 6 months? I feel like it was constructive. I don't know if that's legally something we're allowed to do, but I would throw that out there. I would love to work more with some of these other boards so that everyone knows what everyone else is working on and doing, so we don't feel like we're operating in a vacuum, which I feel often we feel that way.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. We can look for like a 6-month update, or try to meet this summer. There's nothing restricting how often we could meet. Once a week. Attendance would be low after a while, but yeah, there's nothing, as far as our charter or anything else that would prevent us from doing so. And I think you make a good point. And I think this would be a good task for the board to take on, Mr. Chair, is if we had our staff come share our strategic plan with you all, and then you all could identify how historic preservation fits into some of those different priorities.
It'd be great.
Great.
Because then you're really looking at it from your perspective. You're not reinventing the wheel or anything else like that.
Thank you.
I think that would be effective. Okay, thank you very much. Back to you, Commissioner Johnson, I'm assuming for a motion.
Yeah, for a motion, and first a few comments. I'm really encouraged by some of the conversation that we've had here, but what I don't want to happen is have us leave this conversation with the historic preservation planner as the end all and be all and the savior for what needs to happen around historic preservation. So I really want us to be creative about what we can do in the interim with the tools we have, with the staff we have, with both this board and the Historic Preservation Board. What can we do right now? Because this is absolutely part of our strategic plan in terms of equitable development. If we do not deal with this literally right now, then there will not be anything left to preserve. So for me, I understand that we are coming back, the city manager is coming back with some information about the different areas of equitable development that we want to tackle. I mean, I'm going to assume that what we're going to be doing at our next few meetings is prioritizing some of the work that we have asked the staff to do, and also how that's going to get done. And I also understand that there might be extra resources that we're putting towards some efforts. I think it behooves us to have a conversation about, where this lands as a priority for the community and also for this commission. So, tell me if I'm wrong, Manager Feldman, but I'm hoping that's the way that we're going to be approaching some of the work that is coming up, in the very near future.
I think that's a good summary. I think that's a good summary.
Okay, great. So I will go ahead and begin to make this motion with some of the notes that I have. Please, anybody feel free to add in if I've forgotten something. But one is to weave historic preservation into our equitable development discussion. Two, this is more of a charge, I think, for both the board, the Historic Preservation Board, and staff. What are some short-term solutions that you want to see happen within the next, let's say, 2 months? I've heard mentioned, demolition by neglect. I've heard you mention that we need to, that you would like to consult with the city attorney on landmarking buildings. So whatever we can do that does not necessarily involve the historic preservation planner, I think it's important that at your next meeting, you talk about those things and you come back to us, with what you need to do to get it done. That does not involve staff, right? So what can we do? So the short-term solutions from, working with staff over the next 2 to 3 months that you feel like need to be addressed sooner rather than later. 3 is an internship position. I'd like for staff to explore what it would look like to set up an internship position to assist the work of the Historic Preservation Board. 4, for staff to figure out how the HPB can get access to the master site file. 4, oh no, I'm on number 5. I'm really comfortable with the conversations that I've had today about, with everyone and their stance on historic preservation. But I also recognize that there are other boards that are important, like the City Plan Board, the Development Review Board. I would really like to have a more formal process by which we interview our potential board members. Not just asking them to show up and say a couple things for a few minutes. Like, what are some specific questions that we want answers to as a board to ascertain whether or not they're a good fit for how we want to move forward as a city. So this is part of the motion, to task our staff with coming up with a more robust interview process for specifically these 3 boards, the Historical Preservation Board, the City Plan Board, and the Development Review Board, and then to bring that back to us. I think I'm on number 6 now. This is part of Mr. Hills and what Commissioner Sacco was saying, is the designated historic neighborhoods. I think, Commissioner Sacco, you said that some of that is going to come back to us already, so maybe we don't need to put that as part of the motion. Okay, so I'll leave that out. And that is everything that I think that I've heard. Is there anything that I've missed that anybody wants to add to this?
Real quick, Commissioner, if you could run down that list without any commentary in between, just so we know what the discrete points of the.
Okay, I'm going to try that again.
For me.
Mayor, how would you like me to show the motion on the screen?
Fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be great. And for Commissioner Johnson, for the more robust interview process, what staff do you want to come up with those guidelines? Do you want it to be
the clerk? The clerk.
Okay. Okay, let me, hold on, I gotta get my participant screen back up. Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk, for putting that up. Thank you, Commissioner Johnson, for the motion. Is there a second? I can't see most of your faces, so I need to hear somebody and identify who you are.
Second, Mr. Mayor, from me.
I have a question before we continue.
I'll get to everybody, but who seconded?
Commissioner Ariola. Myself.
Okay, thank you. A motion by Commissioner Johnson, second by Commissioner Ariola. Okay, up next we have Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm comfortable with most of these. Number 5, though, we already have the list of interviewees and their contact information, and often their resumes as well. We can each individually do all the interviewing we want, and many of us often do. I don't think we need to complicate that process further. Thank you.
Okay, we can split that part of the motion out. Commissioner A. Santos.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the interview process as well, I mean, I think that's, everyone has different questions that they have. I mean, I usually call those kind of boards that are individuals and stuff like that. On number 4, I think a better idea, because my understanding before we are advocating for getting access for it, but when it was saying it has all archaeological sites on it and some that are not supposed to be released to the public. And I don't know if I'm ready to advocate for getting that access right now without getting a better idea of what exactly that is and what are the kind of liabilities that we may take on as a city if we give that access, and then information gets out. So I have concerns about, I don't know enough about that to be able to move forward on that right now. So I'd like for that to be removed as well. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not removed, but at least separated out.
Commissioner Johnson, would you mind modifying that item to bring back information about the implications of that? Because that's something I don't know enough about either. So just if we could learn more information about what it is and how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. Number 5, yeah, I think we can all individually contact the interviewee and conduct that, ask the questions that we need to ask. And I also think we missed one important addition is to actually take a look and review section 30-3.5, have staff or legal take a look at that and how we can amend that or make it where, or just update it.
And Commissioner, that's the requirements for board members.
Right, the requirement.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Criteria. Yeah.
Okay, maker of the motion concurs with that. Okay, I don't know exactly I'm sorry, was that it, Commissioner Simmons?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, and then I don't know the name DM Massey 1. Not sure who that is.
Yes, that's Danielle Massey.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
Sorry, I don't know how to change how that comes out. I'm not sure why that says that way.
No problem. You are recognized.
There's I believe a few members that are on the board or were currently on the board and it got delayed. Are we going to now continue to wait to make those appointments official until all this gets through? So the members are continue to be on the board, but not formally?
We haven't had that discussion, but I'd say if this motion passes because we want to look at requirements for board membership, we probably would delay that, yes. We wouldn't want to appoint people and then change the requirements shortly afterwards, I wouldn't think.
Right, so the members that, I believe I fall into that category, but I'm on the board for 4 years, but I'm not sure if my position is formal or if I just keep getting invited and my application had been put in to continue to be a member of the board. I'm just not sure.
You'll serve until either you're no longer willing to, or we put out a formal call for applications and then make a decision on the commission. So if you're still willing to serve, you'll continue to serve in your capacity.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hassauer.
There we go. Sorry about that. One on the motion, develop an internship position to assist the board's work. I would think that it would be to assist the plan there with the board's work. Because they're not assisting us directly.
I think we could just take off assisting whom and just say develop an internship position and then figure out what their responsibilities will be.
Okay, and then now I'm confused after your answer to Danielle. I've only been here one cycle. Was I supposed to reapply to be on the board again, or do I just stay on the board?
They'll let you know when your term's coming up. The clerk's office will.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. Hill.
Sorry about that. Commissioner Santos, you made a mention about the master site file. So the form that Mr. Fowler at the state up in Tallahassee made me fill out says that I must agree and acknowledge to Florida Statute 267.135, which says any information identifying the location of an archaeological site held by the Division of Historical Resources of the Department of State is exempt from statute 119.071 and section 0.24a of art and Article 1 of the state constitution. If the Division of Historical Resources finds that the disclosure of such information will create a substantial risk or harm, theft, or destruction at such site.
Okay.
If you guys want, I can send this to the your guys' email that's kind of like the pool, just so you guys have records, so you can make your decision accordingly on that.
Thank you. Back to you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me explain a little bit more about 5. I consider these boards incredibly important. Like the city manager and like our charter officers, I envisioned a process where we all came up with 5 to 10 questions that were important for us as a board to know and to ask potential board members, because I believe that there needs to be a more public process to how we enter. So it's not the conversations that we have over the phone. It's not the conversations that we have behind closed doors. The development in our community and how our community develops is of importance to everyone at this point. It's very clear in the way that the community has responded. So to me, it's an opportunity for us to be more transparent and for also all of us to be on the same page about the same questions that we're asking of the people that are going to be on this board. So that is why I've asked for a more formal process for interviewing the board members. It could take, about an hour at a commission meeting or at a GPC meeting, but we are at least all on the same page and we all know the same answers and the same answers to the same questions that we're asking of these very important positions in our community. So that's my explanation on that. I also want to add, to expand the clerk's office to work on expanding the pool of applicants. I know that they've been working really hard. I think some of us have some ideas about how they can do that, but I think that that's also really important.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you, Mayor. Number 5, what I can see us doing is maybe attaching in the application, or have a paragraph or something stating what our expectations are as a commission, and if that's okay with the applicant, if that's something they're up to being comfortable with, then they can apply for that position. I think we should add something to the application process to say, hey, we've done our strategic planning, historic preservation is extremely important, and whatever questions or ideas that we have, we can come up together, put that in the application process. If the applicant is okay with that, then they apply for it. If they don't, then they don't. So, I think that's a more easier and smooth process. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. On number 3, developing an internship position, I think that maybe should be once we hire the new historic preservation planner, because that's who they're going to work closely with. And probably that should be tied to that. So whoever we hire is a part of developing that and going out and actually finding that internship position.
Yeah, we will. Y'all are getting into management here. We will. It's just saying that we want to have a discussion, look at what other communities do, how that might work, how that fits into what we're doing. So we're not hiring them to. I do, Commissioner Johnson, to number 5. I do like the idea. I don't think 5 to 10 for me, but anyway, I don't want to wordsmith it the dais here. I think we could put 3 questions on the applications for each of those 3 boards that are very specific to the work of those boards, so we get a better understanding. Because right now we just ask, why do you want to be on the plan board? And so it's you've read the application. Some people go and do a long explanation. Some people say, because I want to serve our community. But if we were to come up with 3 very focused questions that have to do with the work of each of those boards to get a much better understanding of how they would approach the job, I think that really gets to the information that would be helpful for us making a decision. And it's also public record that way too, once those are answered. Back to you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks. I'm gonna just give one more push for this, is that, I've seen it, and I've also been guilty of it myself. But I think that, a lot of people, some of the people that apply for the Historic Preservation Board, either we are comfortable with, I'm sorry, not the Historic Preservation Board, boards in general. Either, we are comfortable with, we know them, someone else advocates for them. I think that it's really necessary for all of these boards, because it's so important for our community and the development of our community, that it takes out some of the, this is a more transparent process, and it takes out some of the guesswork of, did we, are we doing this because we just, this is a familiar name to us? Are we doing it because it's a friend of a friend of a friend? I think that we need to be a lot more transparent with the way that we are appointing people on specifically these two boards. And I think that it would serve us well to ask current board members and also potential board members some very specific questions about some either development decisions or the way that they will be making decisions for us in the future.
Okay, well, it's something we'll have to talk about as commission. I mean, to get into the specifics of it. So if this motion passes, we'll schedule that probably, I'm guessing, for a general policy committee meeting to have a deeper discussion on that. Does anybody want me to split out that item? I'm seeing one nod, so I'll go ahead and split it out. Okay, so let's go, we'll vote in a sec, but let's go to public comment. And then once we hear from the public, we'll move back to a vote.
Thanks, Mayor. We've had one caller standing by for a while. It's Melanie Barr. Melanie?
Okay. So I want to go back and talk about some history here in case people aren't familiar with the situation. And in 1979, that was our first survey of the city, and we surveyed the entire city. And I was the on-site coordinator for the company from Atlanta who did the survey. And prior to that, I'd actually gotten involved in historic preservation when I joined this organization, Historic Gainesville, in 1972. So I've been involved with historic preservation for a long time, including the African American Historic Districts, because I was one of the founders of the Pleasant Street Historic Society, who is supposed to be an advocate for at least the Pleasant Street area and possibly the Seminary Lane area. But I was appointed to be on the original Historic Preservation Board, which was called the Heritage Conservation Board. And then after 3 terms, I was told I could no longer be on the Preservation Board. And so we had term limits then. And I don't agree with term limits. I think we need the institutional knowledge. The new people aren't aware of what's been done. They don't know Gainesville as well as the people who have been here for decades. So I don't agree with term limits, and I'm glad they're not in there, and I don't think they should be instituted. In terms of section 30-3.5, the first 3 recommendations or the first 3 duties of the Preservation Board, I really feel like that's the staff's job. The Preservation Board are volunteers. They often work full-time or go to school full-time. And those first 3 duties are something someone who's getting paid should be doing. And if we do get someone who works full-time as a staff person, they should have time to do this, or they can assign the intern to do it. But this is possibly one reason people don't join the Historic Preservation Board, is because this looks like a job description. And if you're a volunteer that's going to school or working, you don't necessarily have time to do those things. So I think if you're going to revise the Preservation Board's duties, those are some things that should be put on staff. Let's see. There was one more thing. Okay, and the person should have experience. Definitely do not hire someone who just graduated college. We need to have someone who's a knowledgeable preservation planner, not an entry level, because they are going to be as baffled as every new person on the board. We need institutional knowledge on the board, and we need a staff person who is very familiar with historic preservation. And if you have any questions for me, please let me know. I've been involved with historic preservation, as I said, since '72. I live in the Duck Pond and I own historic houses here. And I'm very involved with historic preservation for over 40 years. So if there's any questions of me, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Barr.
Mayor, while Ms. Barr was speaking, we did have 2 other callers join us. If you don't mind, I can live screen those.
That's fine.
We have a caller ending in 4122. If you're here to speak on the historic preservation item, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. This is Marty Hilton. I'm the Director of Historic Preservation at the University of Florida, but I'm here calling in to speak as a resident of Gainesville. And I would just like to remind the Commission that the agenda for the last joint board meeting was actually 6 recommendations that came from a task force that I, along with the former part-time historic preservation planner, Clary Larkin, put together following the demolition of St. Michael's Church, which I had nominated as a landmark. And at the top of that list was a full-time preservation planner. I think that's been well covered. The second was the demolition delay, and I'd like to clarify that St. Michael's actually had a Florida Master Site File form, and the attorneys for the Episcopal Diocese who own the property were very aggressive, and for the first time in history, a Florida Master Site File form was removed. So to go back to the earlier comments about a demolition delay, I personally would advocate for a 90-day stay across the board, or at least of buildings of a certain age. We recommended 30 years, the task force, but I don't think it's a good idea to tie the demolition delay to master site file. Since we're on the topic of master site file, yes, archaeological sites are not really allowed to be shared, but other master site file forms certainly can, and there are paper copies there at the Thomas Center that could be scanned and made available to the board. Our third recommendation was about local designation and ordinances. And to address Commissioner Sacco, our ordinance actually allows for new districts and new landmarks. It's just been a very long time since we've had a new district or landmark proposed. It's a bit of a convoluted ordinance, to be honest, and it could be cleared up. I've been doing this for decades. It took me a while to figure out how to move the St. Michael's nomination forward. It also took the city a while to figure it out because the ordinance just hadn't been used in a while. But it's there, and I authored 2 grants. We just finished the second phase of a survey of mid-20th century resources, and we identified lots of neighborhoods and lots of individual buildings that could potentially be considered for listing. Our fourth recommendation, as part of the current ordinance, there's a thing called a heritage overlay district. It's not as rigid and as prescriptive as a historic district, but it's a great tool that a lot of cities use to help preserve neighborhoods like Porter's, which was mentioned earlier. The heritage overlay district would be an excellent option for Porter's. It could have been an excellent option and may still be for Fifth Avenue. And I'm a resident of Florida Park, and we've had some discussion. I think it could be an excellent option.
Mr. Morris, you're going to run out of time here, and we already have heritage overlay in our referred to in our plan. So if you could just hit your last 2 points real quick before we run out of time.
And then I think that our other recommendations were certainly better partnerships, which has been already been stated. But I think the biggest thing is the commitment from the city in terms of funding to support all of these efforts. And I'll end it with there, but I just wanted to remind everyone about the task force recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Appreciate you giving us that historical perspective.
And Mayor, one more caller is ending in 7394. Caller, if it's regarding historic preservation, please go ahead.
Hello, Mayor and Commissioners. This is Kathleen Walston-Pagan. I'm a county planner, but I am speaking today as a resident of the city. I live in a 1948 structure, but it is not in a designated district. But I like the neighborhood, and it's comprised of a mix of structures as early as 1920, I believe, into the 1950s, maybe one 1960 structure. But I'll try to be brief. Mostly I wanted to mention a few thoughts that could be possible funding mechanisms. This summer, the Florida Trust allowed a virtual conference, very reasonably priced at $25, partnering with Main Street, Florida. And one of the tools that was mentioned is a vacant building ordinance. I really haven't done much research yet, but the Center for Community Progress has information online. This would be if an owner of a building allows it to be vacant for an extended time, that there could be fines, and those could be utilized for neighborhood grants or repairs. I don't know if it has to be specific to that structure, but demolition by neglect is certainly a major concern. Even in a undesignated district, repairs are necessary on an ongoing basis. Another thought I've had is increasing the construction and demolition fees so that it's not quite as easy to just move a historic building that's been demoed to a landfill. I don't know how that could be adjusted, but make the resource value apparent in the cost that it requires to remove it. And then finally, this wouldn't be specific to historic properties, neither would the C&D landfill fee, but I know that in Oakland, California, there's a convenience store ordinance that requires a special fee for litter abatement. There are studies that show that around a convenience store, there's more litter, and so you require the source to pay the cost of managing that for beautification. And I would like to thank the commission. I was also at the April meeting, and I know that there was discussion then about the Hartman House. I recently visited that park for the first time and could only see the building from the exterior, but it's an excellent project, so thank you very much.
And Mayor, that's all the callers on the line.
Okay, thank you all. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. Back to you, Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I wanted to find out if staff can give us an update on the part 2 that Marty mentioned, the work to change the demolition delay ordinance.
I was actually going to suggest, because that was one of the things that that Sal, the former historic preservation planner, had been working on after he came on. So I think we could probably, in terms of like what are the sort of short-term things that we could try to bring forward before like refilling the position. I think that is something that we could bring forward to the it would go through, probably start with the Historic Preservation Board, and then eventually we get up to the City Commission.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. So looks like that's everything. So we're going to move to a vote. We're going to split out number 5 and vote on that first. If everyone can read that on the screen, I'll read it out loud too. The clerk develop a more formal process for interviewing board members and expand the applicant pool. And so, Madam Clerk, if you'll move to a vote of the commission on just number 5.
Sure, I just wanted to respond to one of the public comments. Is that okay? Right.
Yes, go ahead.
So just on demolition and neglect, we passed the rental housing ordinance, which will dramatically affect this. And now you just can't make money on and rent out a place and let it rot. You'll have to keep it up. So I think that is a direct attack on demolition and neglect. And then also yesterday at the Zero Waste Subcommittee, we discussed construction and demolition. And a part of that is looking at how do we incentivize being able to not demolish a historic place, but actually being able to move it instead of if it's demolished. And also putting in like a salvage ordinance, which gets to the point of kind of raising the cost of demolition. If a place is of a certain age, then you would have to salvage what's inside instead of just demolishing it how it happens today. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, a vote on just number 5.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Commissioner Simmons?
No.
Commissioner Ward?
No.
Commissioner Ariola?
Aye.
Commissioner Santos?
No.
Commissioner Sacco?
No.
Mayor Poe?
Aye, that motion fails 3-4. You had Johnson, Poe, and Ariola in the affirmative. Okay, and then we're going to move to a vote on the rest of the motion. Madam Clerk?
Commissioner Simmons?
Aye.
Commissioner Ward?
Aye.
Commissioner Ariola?
Aye.
Commissioner De Santos?
Aye.
Commissioner Sacco?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
Aye.
Mayor Poe?
Aye, that motion passes unanimously. All right, want to thank the board for spending time with us and sharing your thoughts. I really do appreciate it. We will work on scheduling sort of a 6-month update or so. It's going to be sometime this summer. You know, in the meantime, we'll work on updates. I think, Mr. Chair, if you all could look at our entire strategic plan and look at how your board and the sort of larger scope of historical preservation fits into that, and then you could send a report back to the commission, that would be helpful for us. And I think also give you all something more sort of meaningful to work on besides windows and fences. That gives us a lot of work to do. And so I want to thank you. And with, well, I got to go. I guess I see more hands coming up. I have starving children that need fed. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mayor Pro Tem. And I will look forward to our next meeting. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Chair, I am going to adjourn the City Commission. I see a hand up for one of your members, so if you'd like to allow your member to speak, that'd be fine. Ms. Lucas?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask before we leave of everyone that's still on here from my board. I know we're meeting in just about 2 weeks to kind of help move all this along and hear from some of our newer members. Would it be possible for everyone to just kind of like make a little list addressing the short-term things that we can do before our next meeting, as well as long-term visions and projects that you want to see done? That way, by our next meeting, we can have that on the table to discuss. Sound good?
Works for me.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
All right, everyone. Have a good night.
Okay, well then I guess that we're adjourning our board then.
So do we have to do a motion to adjourn? Or we just adjourn?
No, you don't need a motion to adjourn.
Huh, okay.
Done.
Everyone have a good evening.
Next week.
Thank you all.
Hey, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
See y'all in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, November 10th.
The 10th.